Hey, peace and love. This is Brother Garfield, and we're back. This is the Brother Garfield podcast, and today I have a real special guest, ladies and gentlemen. You're talking a gentleman, Brother Garfield, and we're back. You're talking about a gentleman that I respect a lot, based on the fact that one of the things that I noticed is that he went to the Cheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal. He's also he's a historian of Islam and the modern West African Muslim diaspora. He joined the history department of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia in 2002. Educated at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar and Michigan State University. Dr. Babou is the author of Fighting the Greater Jihad. A matter of fact, let me put his two books up, which I'm actually going to purchase today. I'm going to purchase as the interview is over. His book, Fighting the Greater Jihad, is one of his books. And another book he has is the Muridiyya on the Move, the Islam Migration and Place Making, all right, by Cheikh Anta Babou. I'm going to ask him how he pronounces his name because I hate to mess up people's name, man. I don't want to pronounce a name incorrect. And then he said, no, my brother, it's not that way. So I want to give my brother the utmost respect. He's a doctor. And he seems to be a very honorable person who has put in a lot of work as far as education, as far as putting the work in. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm presenting to you today none other than Cheikh Anta Babou. Can you tell me how to pronounce your name properly, brother, so I don't mess it up? Or tell me what you rather me call you.
You've done well. My name is Cheikh Anta Babou. Cheikh Anta Babou. You did quite well. The Sheikh is the tough one. The Sheikh is the tough one.
Okay, I got you.
And you passed that one.
All right, beautiful. Tell us, where are you from originally? Tell us a little about you. Where are you from?
Yeah, originally I'm from Senegal, and I'm from West Central Senegal. That's where I was born and where I grew up. In Senegal is a country that is 95% Muslim, and so it's expected that I would be born in a Muslim family.
Right.
And I was born 7 kilometers from the heartland of the Muridiyya, one of the largest Sufi orders in Senegal, and the only Sufi order that was actually created by a black person. All the rest of them were created in the Middle East by Arabs. So I was born there. I grew up there, and I moved to Dakar to go to the University of Dakar, where I studied first at École Normale Supérieure, where I earned a master's in educational sciences, and then at the history department, where I earned a master's in history.
Mm-hmm. The Cheikh Anta Diop University. How do we look at Cheikh Anta Diop? How is he recognized in Senegal? Is he like a national hero?
Cheikh Anta Diop is certainly one of the, if not the most influential African thinker of the 20th century. He is a Pan-Africanist figure. He's not confined to one place in Africa. He's not confined to one place in the world. He's everywhere you find an African diaspora. Mm-hmm. But I think he doesn't have that recognition in the context of Senegal. And the reason for that was he was a scholar, but also a politician. He's somebody who had a vision for Senegal, and that vision was not only confined in books. He wanted to translate that vision into practices to transform Senegalese society by not only talking the talk, but walking the walk. Mm-hmm. And since he is of the generation of independence, he was not very much welcome by those who end up leading Senegal after independence, his own generation, including the first president of Senegal, Léopold Sédar Senghor, who was a Francophile person, somebody who was very close to French academia and French politician and government. Cheikh Anta Diop was a cultural nationalist, someone who was very much rooted in African culture and tradition, who was very much against the French civilizing mission, and who was very much feared by France as somebody who developed a counterculture that very much challenged the French colonial project. So in post-colonial Senegal, he was very much marginalized until the academia rose up to put him at center stage and just force politicians to accept him. First, by naming the largest university in Senegal after his name, Cheikh Anta Babou University, and the street that pass in front of the university after him, Street Cheikh Anta Diop, and the laboratory where he works to develop the carbon 14 project, also named after him. So basically, he is confined in academia, but beyond academia, he's very much really recognized in Senegal at large. But yet, elsewhere in Africa, he's very much recognized as an important African scholar and African nationalist.
Is there a museum named after him?
No,
Okay. Okay. So that means if I visit Senegal, I would just have to visit the university. That's where they keep a lot of his works and so forth.
yes, when you visit Senegal, certainly IFAN, the institution that was funded by the French, which became the custodian really of African artifacts, not only of Senegal but West Africa, because as you know, Dakar, Saint Louis in Senegal was the capital of French West Africa. So, and the archive in Senegal is also the archive where documents from the eight French former French colonies are kept. So, to some extent, when you go to the University Cheikh Anta Diop of Dakar, Ifan is named after him, but there is not a repository of this document. There
Mm,
is no effort, state effort really to kind of collect his work and to have a repository of it. But certainly you can visit his laboratory, which is still exists, the Carbon 14 laboratory, which is still run today, and I think is getting some work done. And the IFAN has a museums, and of course these museums are linked to his name too. Although they are not named after him, they will call them the Museum of Ifan Cheikh Anta Diop.
right.
So you will have the opportunity also to visit those museums. Two of them actually in Dakar and one of them in Gore Island.
Okay. All right. So you have two books
Mhm.
that I'm aware of. The Fighting the Great Jihad. Um, what is this book? This first book that we're talking about. It's called The New African Histories: Fighting the Greater Jihad. Amadou Bamba and the founding of the Muridiyya of Senegal, 1853 to 1913. What is this book about?
This book is really about is an intellectual biography of
Hmm.
Sheikh Amadu Bamba, who is the founder of the Muridiyya order, the only Sufi organization that I know that was founded by a black person. Amadou Bamba was born in the area where I grew up, and he belonged to a lot family with a long tradition of Islamic learning, Islamic teaching,
Hmm.
and he grew up at a troubled time in the history of Senegal, the end of the Atlantic slave trade, but also the onslaught of the French colonial conquest and the French project of the civilizing mission, which was a project of erasure of African culture and imposition of of French culture and civilization of African people as a way of facilitating colonial domination and exploitation. So Shah Ahmadu Bamba happened to be a man of peace. He was someone who promoted nonviolence under colonial rule, but he was also somebody who had its own competing kind of cultural project, which the French very early on identified as a threat to colonization. So that although he did not call for a fight, and he actually opposed jihad of the sword, which some Muslim actually conducted to fight the French, he argued that the only way to beat the French is really by strengthening our culture and by telling our narrative and by not giving them the opportunity to use their superior military force to defeat us.
Hmm.
And for him, the fight was not really to control bodies, but to control mind. And in
Hmm.
that fight to control mind, we have the upper hand. So let's fight that fight. So he was seen by the French as a threat, was arrested for the first time in 1895, was exiled in Central Africa, in Gabon, Equatorial Africa, in Gabon for 7 years, brought back, exiled again in Mauritania, brought back, put under house arrest until he died in 1927. So
Wow.
the last 32 years of his life, he was never free to do anything. Although he was a man of peace, who wrote about peace a lot in his poetry, who call on people to pay their taxes and to accept the idea that the God decided that French should rule us. But this should not actually be an obstacle for us to being Muslim, because you don't have to live under a Muslim state to be a good Muslim. But he was adamant in his project of developing the Muridiyya as a community of Muslims rooted in their culture, rooted in their religion. And the French saw him as danger, as a threat, but he never backed down on that one. He said, "I'm not fighting a jihad of the of the sword, but I'm fighting a jihad of the tongue. I'm fighting
Mm.
a jihad of the pen, and I'm not backing down on that jihad."
Wow. I like that guy. He reminds me of Leonard Howell from Jamaica. You know, that fighting energy. They locked him up. He came back out. He still started the Rastafarian movement and kept going. Let's take a step back for a minute. We talked about Sheikh Anta Diop a while ago. What is your feeling of the work that the legacy that he left as far as the Egyptians are concerned? Do you see the indigenous Egyptians as Africans? Do you see them as Africans as how we look at Africans today?
Well, I'm a historian,
Hmm.
and history is also about geography. As far as geography is concerned, Egypt is located within the borders of Africa.
Hmm.
So, from a geographical standpoint, it is part of Africa. Now, the issue is the cultural standpoint. Can we look at pharaonic Egypt as an African culture?
Hmm.
As Cheikh Anta Babou would say, Negroid culture. I know
Hmm.
that those are word we don't use anymore, but that's the word of his time. It makes
Right.
sense of his time to talk that way because the people he was writing against used that language and use his language to push back against them. Well, I teach pre-colonial African history, Africa before 1800, and in that class I focus mostly on African history before the encounter with Europe, before the coming of Europeans.
Right.
And clearly, what I see when we look at the history of the Nile Valley is the cultural complex that is shared not only by Egyptian but also by Nubian and by Abyssinians. And it's in that context that pharaonic Egypt culture was born. In
Hmm.
fact, Egypt, as we know it, pharaonic Egypt owe a lot to Nubia. I think there is extensive evidence
Hmm.
that pharaonic Egypt, that is the Egyptian civilization that developed on the lower Nile Valley, originated in the upper Nile Valley, meaning in the Sudan of today or the Nubia of the past.
Right.
Some of the most important symbols of pharaonic Egypt, the crown uh, of the king, for example, that is symbolized by uh, the upper kingdom and the lower kingdom. Those symbols existed in Nubia before they moved up to Egypt, to pharaonic Egypt. We know that Egypt was unified by Narmer, who was the king of Upper Egypt, who
Right.
actually unified Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt to form pharaonic Egypt as we know it today. We know that, for example, the circumcisions, we know that many of the ceremonies actually that was at the center of pharaonic Egyptian culture started first in the south before moving north. So there is evidence, strong evidence now that Egyptian culture, at least the foundation of it, was very much rooted in a complex of culture that was shared by people in area we call today Nubia and in area we call today Abyssinia. So clearly, uh, in my view, early Egyptian culture was an African culture. Now, what happened afterwards is more complex because Egypt invaded other people, was invaded by people. We know that they invaded by Assyrian. We know that they were invaded by Libyans, and later on by Alexander the Great and the Roman. But before that, when we look at the early history of Egypt, it's deeply rooted in the African soils of the
Hmm.
Nile Valley.
Beautiful. All right, let's go to the next book, the Muridiyya on the Move: Islam, Migration, and Place Making. What is this book about?
Well, this book is really the continuation of the first book to some extent.
Hmm.
What I tried to do in the first book, there is a chapter where I talk about uh, how do you make Islam comfortable in the land of what the Muslim call in the land of Christian. When Senegal was conquered, for Muslim scholars, Senegal had become now what they call Dar al Kufr, that is the land of unbelief because of French cultural domination. One of the arguments I make in my book that the Muridiyya was able to accommodate French rule and to feel comfortable against Rome because it was able to create Dar al Islam, that is, land of Islam within Dar al Kufr, land of Christianity or land of unbelief. And how this was done? I argue that this was done by transforming secular, ungodly land into a sacred Islamic land. And how do you do this? You do it by infusing Islamic culture, by saturating the space itself with Islamic values, through the use of architecture, through the use of naming, through the use of iconography. I am arguing that when Amadu Bamba, for example, was confined in house arrest in Jurbel, the colonial city, from 1912 to 1927, when he died, he was able to feel comfortable because he could
Mm.
have this space transformed completely in a way that make it connect to the land of Islam. Through ceremonies that were done there, through festivals that were done there, through mosque that was built there, through cemeteries that were made there, from Quranic schools that were made there. So to some extent, he was able to imbue that space, to saturate the space with Islamic culture and value to the extent that he felt comfortable living there. Now, how do we connect this to this book? In this book, what I argue is that Muridiyya had become something that is portable, that can travel, a form of traveling religion, where wherever they go, Murid can translate that space that is secular, that is European, that is Western, that is urban. They can translate it into Murid space. That is, make it a place that bridge the gap with Senegal, and make it a continuation of the holy city of Touba. And one you see here, what is pictured in the cover that you show here is Ahmadu Bamba Day, that is celebrated in New York City every 20th of July. And the highlight of that day is a march that take Murid across the street of New York as a way of celebrating Ahmadu Bamba, in the way that they sing his sacred poetry, but also the way they dress and the slogan they shout and the placards they hold aloft. All of this I see as a way of turning Harlem into a Murid city, if not for one day.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, you got to support this brother right here, man. I was doing some research on Senegal, right? And I wanted to know about the oral traditions and the history of Senegal. This gentleman popped up, Lamine Osane. He wrote a book about the history of an Islamic clerical people of the Senegambia, the Jakanke. Um, Before we get into the book and his information, how hard is it to do research on traditions within your own culture without European influence? Meaning that them coming in and documenting and spoiling the research for people after them, because we know the Portuguese played a major role in Senegambia, and we're going to get into Senegambia and Senegal and Gambia. We're going to get into that after this, but how difficult it is to get to the root of a story, traditionally indigenous story from Senegal right now. If I'm going back to Senegal and I'm saying I want to know everything about Senegal, pre-colonial and so forth, how difficult would it be from an anthropological point of view?
Very difficult.
Mm,
Um, Very difficult because you have this master narrative that have been established for so long,
mm.
then people don't even challenge him. It's just,
Woo!
they don't just challenge it because it has become normalized. It's become routinized. It has become the story to tell. For example, just my own story, writing my books. I rely a lot on oral sources and on what we call oral tradition. Because when you look at the history of Amadou Bamba, my first book, writing his biography, we have a paradigm that is set, and it's a paradigm that is rooted in the French colonial archives. Archives have this quality of producing knowledge in time of conflict and tension. That's what it does. So since Amadou Bamba was a target of French colonial repression, we know so much about him because they fear him. And when colonial rule fear you, they want to produce knowledge about you. That's how European mind works. They want to know you, because once they know you, then they can see your weaknesses and they can see your strength, and they can diminish your strength and use your flaws to dominate you.
Teach.
So there is a mountain of archive about Amadou Bamba. Not only archive, but also secondary material. Colonial rulers, colonial administrators wrote extensively about him. Western scholar who wrote about him also, since the source was so plenty, they just go to the archive and read the secondary literature and wrote this narrative, so that these narrative keep reinforcing each other, so that the archive is everywhere. The archive is still there, but it's also in the secondary literature. And this paradigm about him was set. So when I wanted to write a history of the Muridiyya that takes seriously Murid voices and offer an alternative paradigm, then my challenge was, how do I confront this set paradigm? How do I confront this NAFTA narrative while still being somebody who will be credible and authoritative and accepted? Somebody that will not be dismissed like Cheikh Anta Babou was dismissed as just somebody writing ideology, somebody who is basically writing hagiography. How do I challenge that? That was my challenge, my friend. How do I do this? Me, a small graduate student, challenging this paradigm that have been set and on which historians and political scientists made their fame and earned their money because it's writing books that people make money and become famous. So
Right.
I am there, then challenging this narrative. So the only way I could do this, I could challenge this paradigm, was to find alternative sources. Yes, I am going to the archive and I spent 6 months in the archive. But I wanted to read the archive with new eyes. I wanted to challenge the archive with an alternative story that is parallel and sometimes intersect with the archive, but challenge it. That's what I did. I spent also 6 months in Murid Heartland interviewing old people, but also reading from their own writing of their history. Because the advantage I had was these Murid also were literate in Arabic, and they wrote in Arabic, and they also use Arabic to write in their local languages, Ajami, meaning using Arab script. So I was able to have a corpus of texts that tell the story of the archive, but with different voices. And it's how I was able to make my own breakthrough by saying, hey, this is what the archives say, but this is what the people say about themselves. And if we want to write a history of the Muridiyya that is true to the Murid, that respect their voices, we cannot shy away from also telling their version of their story. We cannot shy away from challenging and exposing the archival narrative that also tell the story of the powerful and the dominant. That's what actually I did. It's not an easy thing to do because my audience is an audience of academics. I have to earn the respect of academics too. So I have to write the history in such a way that is past the bar of academia too. And I am passing the bar of academia by also challenging the paradigm set by academics like myself. And that's what I had to go through, and that's what I had to do. Fortunately, the book has been accepted, has been praised as a breakthrough work because I was able to find alternative credible sources to challenge the dominant archival narrative. But it's not an easy task because one of the other things that my brother I need to talk about is um, I was accepted because people see my skin color, they see my name, Sheikh Anta, and they associate with me. They see me as somebody who belongs to the community and somebody who they are very kind of keen to talk about because they know that it's somebody who is going to respect their version of the history. But they are also will be very comfortable for me to challenge whatever they have to say. They want me to convey their voices unaltered. I can't do that, of course. I'm a historian. I have to think critically about any source, about any history. And as a historian, I tell stories that people sometimes don't like to hear about. I unearth buried narrative that people don't want to hear, conflict, old one that have been solved and healed. And I've been challenged many times um, by my interlocutors when I ask difficult question about conflict of the past, about tension of the past. But once again, that's what you do when you are a historian. you kind of tell inconvenient stories, and that's what you're supposed to be doing, because we're looking for the truth, and the truth is complex, it's complicated. History is not a very a cool running a river. It's a river that is cut by a lot of cataracts and other things that make it complex and complicated.
Yeah. So I'm reading your friend, the late great Lamin Osane's book about the clerical people of the Senegambia, history of an Islamic clerical people. And he talks about how a gentleman had a vision. This was like around the 12th century or 13th century. He had a vision that he got a vision from, I think, Abraham, Jacob, or and from Prophet Muhammad, I think. And he got a vision that he should call himself the Banu Israel, and that's how the group was formed.
Mhm.
It seems like a lot of people in Africa have either invented an identity or wants to claim that they are Jews. What are your views on this, overall African people?
Well, I don't think that there are many people in Africa who do that. Certainly, there are some Jewish communities across Africa. I talk about the Lemba of Zimbabwe and South Africa, the Baluba of Congo, the Igbo and others, the Beta Israel. You do have those communities that, uh, to some extent, um, put out this narrative of connection with Jews. I don't know to what extent it's a political project, or or is it just memory, or is
Right.
it just a past they believe in. And you can say the same thing about Islam. For example, if you look at the history of Sunjata Keita, I'm sure you are familiar with the story of Sunjata
Yes.
Keita and the Mali kingdom. I was teaching actually the book today in my class, and it started by saying that we descended from Bilali, and Bilali is Bilal,
Hmm.
the Abyssinian, black Abyssinian, who was the companion of the Prophet Muhammad, who was the caller for prayer. Uh, well, you have a whole story told by Griot that connect Sundiata in the 13th century with Bilali in the 7th century. I mean, as a historian, it's very convenient for a Malian king who is projecting his power over a Muslim population to find some connection with early Islam, and
Hmm.
to draw authority and power and credibility from the very early source of Islam, arguing that nobody is more Muslim than I am because my ancestor was there, but of the very beginning. It makes sense politically
Exactly.
speaking. You see what I'm saying? So maybe similar stories happening also about the Jews, but also look, Jews have been around in Africa for a long time. Okay, you have the idea of the lost tribe, and then you have the bogus history of Ham and the Hamitic people of Africa. But you do understand that Hebrew language is an Afro-Asiatic language. It's an Afro-Asiatic language.
Hmm.
Hebrew language is rooted in the same language as Amharic that is spoken in Ethiopia today,
Right.
as Arabic, which is a Semitic language, as Tamazic or Berber, which is a Semitic language, as Tuareg languages, Tamazic, but also as some languages, even Hausa language in northern Nigeria and in Sudan and in Niger, that are also African languages. So there is entanglement between the Semitic language and African languages. These are Afro-Asiatic languages. And,
Hmm.
and some linguists actually argue that Hebrew was not born in Israel, but in Africa, and crossed the Red Sea to the Middle East. That the root of this language is really in Northeast Africa. So you have these long connections, and you do have also early Jew involved in the trans-Saharan trade. We have
Right.
evidence of Jewish tribe actually being involved in that trade, and we have some practices actually in Africa that are very much related to Jewish practices. So you do have a long history there from which people can draw narrative for whatever purpose they have to legitimate whatever it is that they want to legitimate.
Right. Let me ask you this. Can you explain briefly the whole Senegal, Gambia pre-colonial and the new connection to Senegambia? Can you give us a brief history of the naming of that region and how it got to where it is today?
Yeah, these are new names. This place was not called Senegal, was not called the Gambia. Um, these were part of the Mali Empire. Ghana did not have did not reach the Atlantic Ocean and did not cover the part we call today Senegal. It included Mauritania, but certainly not the area we call today Senegal and the Gambia. But what these nations shared together was common belonging to the Mande world. You know, so
Yeah.
common belonging to the Mande world. What really connected them earlier was uh, the Malian Empire and the dispersal of the Mande kingdom, where you have Mande chief scattering around when Mali was defeated by Songhai. You have the ruling class spreading around and taking with them a tradition of kingship and bringing it to a wider communities in the area we call today Senegal and we call today the Gambia. And of course, the Mandinko language was the earlier, the Mandinko speaking people, including the Sose and other ethnic group, were the earlier occupant of this place we call today Senegal and the Gambia. And when you do the oral history, you always get back when you drill deep, deep, deep. At the bottom, you will hear people saying, "Hey, this well was actually dug by Sose speaking people. This
Hmm.
place, this city was built by Sose speaking people." Now you have a number of ethnic groups there, the Wolof, the Fulbe, and other communities, but the root is really the Mande people. Now, over time, you have other kingdom developing, Wolof kingdoms, Serer kingdoms, and other kingdom developing. But at the bottom of their culture is really Mande culture at the beginning. And the history of kingship in all these communities is also tied to Mande narrative of nation building. It is really important to all these communities today.
Okay.
So there is an important book you might want to look at here. There is Boubacar Bari. He is a professor of history, and he's the most knowledgeable scholar of Senegambia. In fact, he has been pleading forever for the erasure of colonial borders and the return to what these people are, that is Senegambian. They are not Senegalese, they are not Gambian, they are just Senegambian. And what we have as borders here are really uh, colonial invention that people even don't react, don't respect at all. You know,
Mm.
I have driven from Senegal to the Gambia without knowing that I'm in the Gambia because there is no border there, there is no border guard, and the language is the same, the food that people eat is the same, the dress they
Wow.
wear is the same, the religion is the same.
Same
So,
minded people.
so the
Hmm.
people are the same. What happened is under colonial rule, people started to invent colonial identities. For example, the same name is spelled differently, are spelled differently in the Gambia and in Senegal. And Gambians don't want to be Senegalese because Senegal is seen as an imperial power, which
Right.
is it's unfortunate because the reality is the culture is the same, the people are the same, the religion is the same, the language are the same, the ancestors are the same, and people move back and forth. you know,
Right. Right.
yeah.
I just got a text a question. What benefit would there be in an Islamic society would there be for a Muslim to identify as having a Jewish background?
Well, I think this come back to history. When we look at history, there is something that, in my view, and this is not only my view, but some scholar who study Islam would make the same, that is unique to Islam. That is providing theological protection to competing faiths. I don't know of any religion that has its sacred scripture provision for theological protection to competing faith. Clearly, the Quran said the people of the book should not be forced to convert to Islam. They should be protected, although they should not be considered as full citizen because they don't pay the zakat. They are not Muslim, but you owe them protection because they are people of the book. They believe in the same God you believe in, Allah, whatever they call it in Judaism and in Christianity, Muslim call it Allah. So you have that. The idea of dhimmi come from there. These are protected people. Uh, and what you have here is that when you have a Muslim ruler of goodwill, and I say it here, a Muslim ruler of goodwill, then he has a theological basis to protect Christians, to protect Jews. That's why, historically, before 1948, I can perhaps argue that the majority of Jews lived in Muslim countries, the Ottoman Empire, in
Hmm.
Morocco, and other part of the Muslim world, because they have this theological protection, which they did not have in Europe. And you don't have in Muslim land, in my view, the pogroms that you have elsewhere. Although, we have evidence in history that Jews were attacked in Muslim land, but the attack was not based on religion, but basically on economic issues. Those who were jealous of Jews attacked them, and we have some instances of that in, for example, Algeria and in Morocco, where you have very militant Muslim arguing that Jews should not occupy the position of our power and authority they occupied in Muslim land. But this was really a minority. We know, for example, the history of Maimonides and Salahuddin, who told Jews who were forcibly converted that they should return to their religion if they want to. And Maimonides actually returned to Judaism. So we have those examples, of course. But once again, theology is one thing, political power is another thing. You can use it the way you want to. And certainly we have example in history where Jews have been oppressed in Muslim land, particularly after the birth of Israel in 1948.
Hmm.
But that kind of theological protection provide any Muslim ruler of goodwill a justification to protecting Jews and to protect his Christians.
Okay. Why would Muslims in West Africa pay 10% for their zakat instead of 2.5%? I guess that's a religious question.
Well, I don't know of examples in West Africa where people pay 10% of their income, let's say their savings, because zakat come from your savings.
Hmm.
After you provide it for your family, what is that it is left in the bank is where you need to pay 2.5% to zakat. And since West African nations, all of them are secular nation, there is no rule as how do you give your zakat. Uh,
Hmm.
in the country from Senegal, people give their zakat sometimes to their imam, sometimes give it to their sheikh, Sufi sheikh. If you are a Sufi, you give it to your sheikh, or you give it to your Quranic teacher. And the measure is 2.5% of whatever it is that you have, or some measure of the staple food. Sometimes it's given in rice, sometimes it's given in millet, and the measure is done that way. I don't know of any West African countries where people give 10% of their saving for zakat. I'm not aware of that.
Okay. For the audience that's watching, if you guys have any questions, I don't want to keep the doctor here long because I do want to do a part two later down the line to deal with Muslims coming off the slave ships and deal with the whole America argument. But I do want to ask you, moving forward, what's your next project that you're working on? As far as I know, you did I have to read your two books too before you come back. But I do want to ask you, what's the next project? Is it a part three to what to other two books, or you gonna have a whole different topic?
Yeah, I'm working on three projects. So ambitious, really ambitious. I would like to write a sequel of my first book, because it stopped in 1912.
Right.
I would like to take up the story from 1912 to 1927, at least 27, when Amadu Bamba died. So that story need to be told. So this is my biggest project, and I have started already doing research on that one. Now, there is also, I have been really asking myself uh, if I should not write something about political Islam in Senegal, particularly. And I've been thinking about it for some years. My area of interest is Sufi Islam, mystical Islam, which is more introspective, more spiritual, and less political. But I think at some point I would want to sit down and really see how what was happening in the Muslim world in the 1970s impacted Senegal,
Mm-hmm.
and the inroad made by political Islam, and how the Islamic tradition that Muslim in sub-Saharan Africa worked out in a long process of incubation and conversation between Islam and traditional religion, how this kind of discursive tradition of making Islam is being challenged by literalist, fundamentalist, text-based Islam that is very much confronting this tradition, Islamic tradition that I write about, and which actually Lamin Sane also write about. At some point, I like to write a book on that. But the book I'm working on right now, that I'm really trying to finish the research on, is the biography of the third caliph of the Murid, um, the third successor of Amadu Bamba, who is a very interesting character because he surprised everybody. So he was somebody who came in a longer tradition of accommodation between the Murid and the state, and he completely changed this relationship and really inserted the Muridiyya in a new trajectory. I'm trying to understand where did this come from. Why did he, to some extent, uh, prove all of us wrong? We felt he was going this direction, he went the other direction, and I like to write a book on him, and maybe this is my most pressing project that I'll be working on now. I'm working on right now.
Do you do back to Senegal trips, like group trips? Do you do like tours or anything like that?
No, I
Oh.
haven't been doing that. I've been just busy doing research and writing books for now. I took students recently in Senegal, really 1 week ago in Senegal, but this was a project that our business school, Wharton here, wanted me to do. They wanted me to take Senegal,
Okay.
some MBA student to for cultural immersion, and I developed a project for them, which was about Muslim civil society and peacemaking. And we spent a week there learning about that.
Wow. Tell me about that. That's a very interesting topic. I'm looking at the topics that you teach. So that would probably be what, Africa before 1800, talking about that,
Y-
or
Yeah,
what?
yeah, and I teach a course on Islam too, the history of Islam in Africa, and I have a course on migration, of course, that is connected to my latest book on Murid migrant and so forth. So, yeah, this was really interesting. These are business students actually, and they have a quite unusual trajectory because many of them are students who graduated, went in the professional world, worked for some years. Some of them are 30 years old, 30 something. Some of them are 20 something years old. And they return back to Lauder here at Penn, Wharton, to do two masters, one in international studies and one as an MBA. And in the context of that international studies, they asked me if I could help them really take this student to learn something about Africa. I told them that I do Islam, and if they're interested in learning about something that might be seen as unusual, that is Muslim making peace, I can do that. And they say, we wonderful, we really like it. And many students actually sign up. And I took them to Senegal, and the topic was Muslim civil society and peacemaking. And we met with, we went to holy cities, we visited holy cities, we visited mosque, we visited museums, we visited mosque being built, universities being built by Muslims there. And particularly, what I wanted them to understand is that you've got here in Senegal Muslim communities such as the Murid that are adamant about their independence. They are not seeking help from the government, they are not seeking help from Arab countries because they understand that if you want to control your sermon, your discourse, you've got to have the means uh, to carry out your own project. Because when people give you their money, when they fund their project, they want you to talk in a certain way. They want you to convey a certain discourse.
Message,
They
right?
want you to produce a certain knowledge. If you want about autonomy of thinking, then you need to have the means for to fund and to finance your own initiative. And the Murid are just like that. They We visited a university that is being built at the cost of many $1 million. I don't know how much, and they just started. That's what they do. Their sheikh said, when we want to do something, we just get started, and then whatever we have, we add to it until we have reached our goal. We're not asking for anybody to help. We're not asking for any funding from anybody because we know that we are the community we are today, and we produce the knowledge we produce today, and we have the kind of sermon we have in our mosque because we have the means of our trade. Depending on other people, will be mortgaging your own voice to others, and we are not going to do that. So I wanted my Wharton student to understand that and to understand that religion can be a stimulus also for economic development, because of this will to make things happen, to carry out their own project that stimulated the kind of economic dynamism of this community that you find everywhere in the world now, in the five continent or whatever continent you have. That kind of drive to make things happen for themselves is really what is the driving force between behind their dynamism and their resourcefulness. uh, yeah.
I see you have a course. You talk about the African immigrant lives in West Philly.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself when you were growing up in Senegal? Did you consider yourself uh, in the Pan African mindset of being African? And do you look at yourself as being African living in Philly today?
Tough question. You're asking me. I grew up in Senegal and I knew Cheikh Anta Diop personally. I've met with
Right.
him a couple of times in his house.
Mm-hmm.
We're named after the same Sheikh, Murid Sheikh,
Right.
Cheikh Anta Babou, Cheikh Anta Diop.
Right.
And we do have we are related a little bit to some extent. So, and I grew up reading him, especially when I was a student at the University of Dakar. And we were all cultural nationalists and Pan Africanists in that context. Now you come to the United States and you learn that you are black. You know, in
Mm-hmm.
Senegal, I just felt I'm Senegalese or African. I never defined myself as black. But you come here in the United States, then you learn you are different because who you are is a dialogical kind of process
Mm-hmm.
where you think that I am who I am, and the people you interact with think you are who you are, or you are who I think you are. So to get back to your question in Philadelphia, I really see myself as an African who straddled many African words. I am multiply embedded, doubly embedded or multiply embedded
Right.
in this Africanness, in this way of being an African. But deep down, I return to Senegal. Really, deep down, I return to Senegal, and that's what where people return me to. You hear me speak, you hear my name. Clearly, you
Mm-hmm.
know that I'm not an African American. I'm not a Caribbean African.
Mm-hmm.
Although, from an ideological standpoint, I think that we share more than we don't share. I think as Black people, there are more that unite us than divide us. And I'm always sad when we are kind of lost in this identity politics that to some extent do the bidding of others rather than focusing on what unite us.
Right.
Yeah, it's always sad to see that.
Yeah. I got a question from each one. What was the role of the Kharijis in bringing Islam to West Africa? I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Yes, the Kharijis. Yeah, we do have evidence of Kharijis being involved once again in the in the trans-Saharan trade, and we have some, for example, in the area of Mauritania, we have some community of Muslims that were very much shaped by Khariji thinking. Yeah, they do have an impact, and one of the reasons for that is that they were very much oppressed in the Muslim heartland. And when they were oppressed in the Muslim heartland, they found themselves at the peripheries of the land of Islam. And the periphery of the land of Islam at that time, part of it, at least not all of it, but part of it was Sub-Saharan Africa. That's where the Kharijis and even some of the Shia actually found themselves involved in trans-Saharan trade and involved also in spreading Islam. But with the rise of the Maliki mazhab and Maliki tradition, Maliki became just hegemonic, and West Africans in their majority are Maliki.
Okay. Hold on one second. Can you talk about differences between the Muridiyya and the Qadariya orders? What approach has been more or less beneficial for West Africans and the diaspora, and why?
Well, the Muridiyya, you may call the Muridiyya a branch of the Qadiriyya because the founder, Amadu Bamba's father, was a Qadiri. And Amadu Bamba himself grew as a disciple of a leader of a branch of the Qadiriyya of Mauritania. But uh, in around, uh, let's say, I'm thinking about the exact date here, 1904, Amadu Bamba said that he actually saw the Prophet Muhammad in dreams. And once again, this is let me say something about dreams. You talk about dreams earlier in the context of African traditional religion. Dreams are very important because for Sufis, uh, gods continue to teach. Allah continue to teach, although He is no longer sending revelations because the revelation ended with Prophet Muhammad. But Allah does not forget His friends and the Wali Allah, those that have been able to be His neighbors, continue to learn from Him, and He teaches them in two ways. One way is unveiling, and the other way is inspiration. Uh, Unveiling is kashf, and inspiration is ilham. And it's in that context that Amadou Bamba actually was had this conversation with the Prophet Muhammad when he was in Mauritania in exile, and the Prophet told him that Amadou Bamba, you followed the great masters. Now you deserve to be a master yourself, and I'm bestowing on you the power to found your own order. Amadou Bamba called it the Muridiyya order. He did not call it Bambia, but he called it the Muridiyya order. Unlike Qadiriya from Abdul Qadir, or Tijaniya from Ahmad al Tijani, or Shadiliya for Ahmad al Shadili, he called it the Muridiyya because he said the Muridiyya is open to anybody who aspire to be closer to God. I don't want to tie it to my genealogy or to my identity. I just want to open it up to anybody who is on a path to God. And my work as your leader is to teach them how to do that. So the Prophet gave him some litanies, as you have in all Sufi orders, the kind of practice that you need to practice to be initiated and to be part of the order. So I think if you tell me what is beneficial from the diaspora, I can certainly reply by conveying what people that I do work with, I research, my interlocutors and my informant told me. One of them, a friend of mine who is a Jamaican Muslim, or who is one of the early followers of the Muridiyya in the United States, told me that for me, Amadou Bamba is the bridge to Timbuktu, is the bridge to Guinea. And we need to get to the fabric of African Islam.
Mm.
And he told me that he had many opportunities to go to study in the Middle East or North Africa, but he declined to go because he know that our authentic connection to Islam has to come from Africa. And he saw Amadou Bamba as one of those bridges that you can use. Of course, he was very much critical of Muslim communities in North America, particularly Muslim from the Middle East, Arab-speaking Muslim, or Muslim for South Asia, and he was critical of cultural insensitivities among them. The fact that they did not take African American Muslims seriously, and he felt that uh, to build a connection with Islam, with Timbuktu, and with those African Muslims that was enslaved and transplanted to North America, we need to go through through Sufi orders such as, for example, the Muridiyya of Amadou Bamba or the Tijaniya of Ibrahim Anyas that have strong connection with the diaspora.
Right. How do you feel about the term sub-Saharan Africans?
For me, it's just geographical naming. It doesn't have any particular prejudice in terms of its connotation. Sub just means south. The reality is, if you take the Sahara at the center, you have the north and then you have the south. The south of the Sahara is Africa. There are many names of it. The Arab call it Bilal as Sudan, for example, the land of the black people. Uh, the Africans don't have a particular name of it, or the name they have is very kind of localized name of it. But I don't have, you know, any particular, opinion of it. It's just a geographic name, south of somewhere or north of somewhere, like the south of the United States or the north of the United States.
Okay. Can you speak about the Jula and the expansion of Islam into the forest regions in West Africa?
Jila are very important agent of Islamization in Africa. and they play a major role in spreading Islam. Of course, Jula are people that are best known for being long distance traders, doing the axis west west rather than north south. The axis north south is Sahara to sub Saharan Africa and sub Saharan Africa to Sahara, mostly dominated by Arabs and Berbers. The Jula are the people who connected with them, who intersected with them, and took whatever good they brought to west or going south. And this, the story of the Jua may be rooted even beyond the Atlantic slave trade, the transatlantic trade. I'm sorry. I would argue that uh, kind of this tradition of long distance trading existed well before the trans-Saharan trade developed. In fact, Jula was instrumental in spreading Islam and helping trade flourish because they already have those know-how, the skills, and the identity of being traders. Now, what happened in the Jula is that they were the first to welcome Islam.
Mm-hmm.
When Islam came in Ghana in the 8th century, 9th century, king resisted, the powerful resisted. The Jula very early on accepted Islam for a variety of reasons, because these are traders, and traders want partners they can work with. But traders also want a script to write with. They want text, which Islam gave them. Traders want also law, that they can use to do their business. So Islam brought all of that, and the Jula were the first people to embrace it. And what happened is that in the process of doing their business, meaning exchanging things, they also exchange religion. Jula are not missionaries as we understand the word traditionally. You can call them unwilling missionaries because they were not really interested in going to places to spread Islam. They just spread Islam in the process of spreading things and selling and buying things.
Okay. I'm going to take two more questions and I'm going to close out because we've been talking for over an hour. And I would like to say that the doctor has two very important books. I would like for the community to support the doctor in what he's trying to convey to us from a public perspective. And it seems I haven't read the books yet, but they sound exciting. It's going to be about somebody who I've never studied before, who is Amadu Bamba. He sounds exciting. You made it sound exciting, so I'm going to buy it as soon as I get off the air. I'm actually going to support you and buy both books: The Muridiyya on the Move, Islam Migration, and the Placemaking. Um, Let me take two more questions. And then I would love to invite you back so we could talk about when they came off the slave ships and deal with Islam in America, which is a total different topic than what we've been going in today.
No
Let me
problem. Read
see.
the two books and then let's discuss them.
Yes, definitely.
Read them and let's discuss them. Yeah.
Was Sheikh Ante Diop, was he a religious or practicing Muslim? Was he religious, practicing Muslim, or was he just, I don't know what that question means, but was he a religious practicing Muslim?
Sheikh Anta Job is an intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
He's a free thinker. Of course, he's a member of the Muridiyya. His name after Amadu Bamba's younger brother, Sheikh Anta Mbake, is Amadu Bamba's younger brother. He belonged to a very well-known Murid family, and where he is actually buried, Cheitu, is is basically a town formed by Sheikh Anta Mbake himself and his brother, his younger brother, Sheikh Anta Job's not younger brother, that's cousin, actually,
Mm-hmm.
who founded that village of Cheishu, where Sheikh Anta Diop is buried. But I see him as a free thinker. I don't see him as a religious person.
Mm,
The experience I have of him, I knew him personally, of
right.
course, but he was not a deep, let's say, somebody who is deeply rooted in practicing any kind of
Religion.
religion. And some of the things he wrote actually could be seen as believing people as problematic. For example, his look at monotheism as rooted in Egyptian culture would be something that people would object to. But historically, it's just what it is. The idea of monotheism very much originated in Egypt, and a lot of what he had to say that come in the Bible and the Quran and the Torah are rooted in Egyptian, what monotheistic people would call pagan religion, or a polytheistic religion would be objectionable to many people. But it's just what history actually The historical evidence actually suggests.
All right. A question from Asari Motep. Can you update the Quran? If not, how beneficial can it be with slavery still legal? Can we make slavery in Islam illegal?
There is a lot of scholarship on slavery and Islam, particularly now. And it should concern that this is happening in the era of Islamophobia too, where Islam is being demonized. Whether it's the Bible, whether it's in the Torah, you see reference to slavery. It's just a reality of the time. And these books are books of their time. You cannot expect a book that was revealed in the 7th century to write about human rights, to think human rights was invented very recently. You
Right.
don't expect a book written with an audience of the 7th century really to talk about these issues, women's right, human right, the way we talk about it today. But you can say something about slavery in Islam. Islam said slavery is a reality of pre-Islamic Arab society. And Islam being orthopraxis as well as orthodoxy, Islam has something to say about what people do, how they live. Because Islam legislate what people do, what they live. And slavery was part of what people live at that time. And Islam legislates slavery. When we look at the arc of what Islam has to say about Islam, in my view, it advised to find a way of minimizing it, or abolishing it without saying you abolish it. For example, there are many offenses in Islam that the Prophet say you should be um, manumitting your slave. You should be freeing your slave for God to have mercy on you. You should be merciful to your slave and things of that sort. You have many things in Islam. And if you are a Muslim and then you marry a slave woman, then you have a son, the son should be free. So you have many provision in Islam, I think, that tend to minimize the evil of slavery without saying clearly abolish it. And I don't know of any religion, I don't know all religions that really say abolish Islam. But the issue is not that. The issue is what Muslims do to what Islam, but the Quran had to say is about Islam in the 21st century. That is what is problematic. Why Muslim in some countries, not in all countries, particularly, I don't want to stigmatize Arab countries, but these are the countries where, where slavery was abolished the latest. In Mauritania, it was, legal until 1981. And it is still practiced today in that country. In the Arab world, people call many black people like myself abid, slave. So
Hmm.
this is the reality. Now, the issue is not what the Quran said. You can go to the Bible and the Torah, see a lot of violence and abusive things. But the issue is, what do Muslims in the 21st century do about what Islam said? Are they highlighting those aspects of the Quran that encourage ending slavery, that reward those who abolish slavery, that condemn the evil of torturing people? Are you going there? Are you making the case that the Quran actually really teach us to be loving, teach us that you are all God's creature, and the Quran clearly said the best among you are those who fear God the most? That the Quran doesn't recognize the difference of skin color or race or class. The only thing it recognizes is closeness to God. Why don't Muslim push that narrative rather than the narrative of Islam said something about slavery, then we cannot abolish the Quran, therefore we can't abolish what the Quran is saying about slavery? That would
Okay.
be my point.
All right. Ah, man, so many questions. I don't even know which one. This is going to be the final question. Oh, so many questions.
And to really directly reply to the brother's question, I am all about uh, uh, having fatwa or whatever it is that happen which would make Islam illegal, which would make slavery illegal in Islam. I'm totally for that. In fact, my sense is that's where Islam, the kind of the moral arc of Islam was standing to, in my view.
All right. Can you speak about the I think you just spoke about this. Can you speak about the Sufi brotherhoods, the Qadiriya and the Fadiliya, and its role in West Africa? I think you spoke about it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, you have branches of the Qadiriya. The Fadiliya is just one branch of the Qadiriya. You have the Mukhtariya. These are all branches that are originating from Mauritania. From a doctrinal standpoint, they are not really different. The only difference is genealogical, or that this one originated from this, community, and that one originated from this sheikh. But as far as substance is concerned, there are no differences between these,
Okay.
and
Let
they
me
play a major role, of course, in spreading Islam in West Africa.
let me ask you a
But
cultural question.
mhm.
Who makes the best jollof rice? Who makes it? Let me know. Let me hear right
Come on,
now.
Garfield. Come on, Garfield. You know my response. Come on, go to Senegal. If you want true jollof rice, jollof is located in Senegal and nowhere else.
Oh man.
Jollof. Yeah,
Listen, family. Look in the description. You're gonna see 2 lectures that my brother gave, and very interesting lectures, by the way. Very, very, very interesting lectures. I would definitely love to invite you back so we could speak about Islam when they came off the slave ships and what went on here in the United States as far as them being part of the revolts and all those different things. I want to talk about what happened when the Muslims who believed in Islam came over
mhm,
and why a lot of the slave masters didn't like Muslims. We're going to get into all of that when we do it. It's probably 2 months. I got to read your books first. I got to read both of them, and then I'll invite you back so we could talk about the books and then talk about Islam here in America. All right.
thank you so much for having me.
I want to say, man,
It was a
again,
pleasure.
thanks for
Yeah,
taking the time out of your busy schedule. And if I missed your question, it wasn't on purpose, family. It was just so much scrolling down. I just caught whatever I could at the time. But thank you again, my brother, for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you on. An African who went to Sheikh Anta Diop's university. It's that guy's was a living legend at the time. He's a legend today. All right.
absolutely,
So peace and
absolutely.
love to you, my brother, and continue with the great work you're doing at the University of Pennsylvania.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much.
much. Thank you for
Yes, sir.
having me. All right.
Yes, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the brother Dr. Cheikh Anta Babou. And we're going to say again, thank you guys for tuning in. A lot of people tuned in late. I'm sorry if you didn't tune in early. Tomorrow we have another guest. I'm not announcing it. I'm just going to put it on live. Whoever jumps on at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, I thank you at that time. But tomorrow we have another guest. And we do have another special guest. Oh, you know what I forgot to ask him, man? It's Women's History Month. I was supposed to ask him what's his favorite woman in history, but hey, it slipped my mind. All right, with all these questions you guys asking. Thank you guys for some beautiful questions, by the way. Beautiful questions. Azania SA, much love and respect to you, brother. Let me see who else I want to highlight. I want to highlight some comments here. We know they didn't like Muslims coming off the boats. Azania SA. Garfield is the doctor defending the Quran. That's late. I won't get into that. Let me see if any more questions. Rudy, you're late, Rudy. Rudy, late, man. You late. All right. All right. So let me cut this off. We could do an after show if anybody want to talk about the show. I got my brother right here, Slick Farouk. Brother Golf, he got the best show on YouTube. He bring on real scholars. I ain't going there. But don't try to put me against Sonetta, brother. Sonetta is doing his thing. I'm doing my thing. Appreciate Sonetta. Appreciate me. Appreciate my brother Asari Motep. Appreciate Unk. Appreciate Black Lion Supreme. Appreciate each one, teach one. Appreciate Master Warrior Clan. Appreciate whoever else got a channel who I didn't even mention. Just appreciate brothers for taking out the time to provide information for the community. That's all we got to do. We ain't got to compete against one another. Sonetta, he's doing his thing. Garfield is doing his thing. Asari Motep is doing a great thing. Sean doing his thing. Marcy doing their thing. Each one teach one doing their thing. Everybody got their lane. I want to bring on scholars so we could hear. I mean, so I'm going to do a show right now so we could get into it. All right, peace and love. Thank you.